what do you think are the three biggest challenges that's facing our country that if elected you're going to have to help deal with?
Well, first the backdrop is Congress is broke, and being broke in the sense that there's no willingness to communicate or collaborate or compromise. So that's the fundamental issue that's causing a lot of the dysfunction in Congress. I think the biggest problems we need to face as in the next Congress is undoing this issue of sequestration, which has taken all the logic out of a budgetary process. People need to understand that your priorities are where you budget the monies. And if we're not willing to have the political courage to make those decisions, if we don't want to have a program, lay it on the line, let's have the debate, and let's put the money where our mouth is. But we won't do that. We have created this sequestration that's going to just take these big cuts across the board. That's not any way to run a business. That's not any way to run a country. And so that's probably the biggest. The other is, we got to deal with the issues that are facing our country on the Affordable Care Act. I mean, for all the hue and cry about what's wrong with it, there's really a lot of good things in there as well. And to keep talking about, we need to repeal this, that's not helpful. Like any major piece of social legislation, you got to go back. If there's bad things in there, let's talk about how we're going to fix it. Let's not try to repeal it 50 plus times. Let's talk about what we can do to fix it. And there are some good ideas out there. So there's some great things about it. I don't particularly like the way it was started as far as the funding stream, but it was a compromise. They had to do what they had to do. But let's not waste any more time talking about repealing this. Let's talk about what we can do to make it better, because it's doing a great service to people. And probably currently right now everybody's a little bit worried about this Ebola scare. And I'm convinced that we're probably going to have more people die of flu than we are from Ebola. But it's a big issue, and trying to politicize the process, we certainly shouldn't be trying to do anything to give people a sense of panic. We're talking about closing our borders, and we need to kind of understand that what we got to do is got to get this contained in West Africa. The longer we wait, the number of cases is doubling. Something I read to the tune of about every 3 weeks, the number of cases doubles, and people are moving around. Even if they don't come to our country, we've got everybody sort of funneled into coming into 4 or 5 places that are equipped to deal with this, checking their temperature. If they've got symptoms, we take them to a well-staffed and trained hospital to deal with this. But people come from West Africa, go to other countries, and then they go to another country and they can fly. We don't want people to go underground and not be willing to tell us where they came from. We need to stop this, and the best way we can do that is let's get the resources we need immediately into West Africa. And I think something else we could probably do is marshal the forces of Europe, and the United Nations. Everybody's got a role in this. Just think if this turned up in Europe, in the United States, in China. I mean, just the effect that it would have. I mean, it's going to be a pandemic, but the effect it would have on the economy of the world. And so we need to get after it. And we know where it is. We need to kind of take care of business there and put all our attention into making that happen, so we don't have to have this distraction about all this other stuff we're talking about. It's not helpful, and we're wasting time.
Let's stay on current events and talk about what are your thoughts on our policy and how we've dealt with ISIS so far?
Interesting issue. I spent a couple of years in Iraq, very close to me as far as things that I've done and things that I would not want to see undone. And for all the effort that we put into that country, it was a little bit disappointing to see it sort of fall apart so quickly. We wanted to stay in the country. Nouri Maliki would not sign a status of forces agreement that would give us the assurances and safeguards about how our troops would be treated in the country. We have this everywhere we go. He wouldn't sign it. We're not going to expose our personnel to those risks, and so we withdrew. Had we stayed there, we would have kept everybody at the table. We would have kept the Sunni and the Shia at the table. We would have kept the Kurds at the table. We would have kept that military together. We were willing to spend. We probably would have probably left a division worth of personnel there, maybe 10 or 12,000 people. And ISIS would never, in my wildest imagination, have come into that country had they known we were there. And so that would have been a great deterrent, but more importantly, it would have kept everybody at the table negotiating. So fast forward, here we are 2 years later, and we get a new prime minister. Immediately signs the status of forces agreement. We have about 1,500 troops there now doing the advising and mentoring and assessing on what needs to be done. And you know, some people are concerned about that. I said, listen, we were going to leave 10 to 12,000. I'm not worried about 1,500. ISIS, when you see what they do, I mean, this is pure terrorism. It's evil. And when you see people being decapitated, you know, it makes your blood boil. It makes you want to do something. But we have to be more deliberate about our decisions on this. So the first question people want to ask is, you know, what are we going to do? When are we going to do it? The better question first is, if we're to do anything, what do we have to accomplish? What's the exit strategy? What do we have to make happen so we can get out of it? And then if we agree that's what we want to do, you know, then we should go in. But I don't think we should go in, personally. I think we got to do diplomacy first, okay? And well, how are you going to deal with, how are you going to do diplomacy with a group like this, a terrorist group, a group called ISIS or ISL or IS? Well, you don't, but you work with the countries in the region. And diplomatically, you have to get them to step up. They are more at risk for what this group is trying to do than anybody else. And so, not to say that in years in the future, just like AQI, Al-Qaeda, and the Taliban, I mean, all of those, not to say they couldn't evolve to that, but we need to get the partners in the region to own up to their responsibility. If there's going to be boots on the ground, I think it needs to be them. We can play a great support role here with intelligence and logistics and air support and training. There's all kinds of things we could do. But the boots on the ground, I think, need to be the neighboring countries in the region. Now, if they go into Turkey, it creates a different dynamic because they're part of NATO. If the United Nations goes in, it's a different dynamic because, you know, of what they do and our role with that. But for us just to go in, and it would probably be the worst thing as far as our national interest, because this is really about an ideology. They want to create an Islamic state, and it's more about, it's not about governance, it's all about their religion, and it's all about politicizing their religion. And so we would not want it to become some kind of, you know, Americans or Christians against, you know, Islam, because I use the analogy of, if we were to go in there and this would fire them up. This would just be a rallying call for more people to come and take up the cause. And it's like whack-a-mole. If we were to disperse them, break it up, they would run to the four corners of the earth, and eventually they would get back together somewhere else. And so we really need a coalition of countries in the region to step up to the plate and do what's in their best interest and all the people, not only for that part of the world, but for the people that are directly affected.
We've been on the campaign trail for several months now. Seen a lot of polls out there. The American people have lost faith in the ability for our elected leaders to solve problems and move us forward. How do we restore the faith? How do you, if you're elected? And what needs to be done so both sides here of the aisle work together to solve problems?
Well, I think it starts with the electorate. And we need to demand more from our elected officials. Personally, I'm a lifelong public servant. I don't think government's the enemy. There's a rightful place. Could government do things better? Absolutely. But any enterprise could always probably do some things better. But it's not that we do everything wrong. And we need to attract our best and brightest into government service, you know, and not just make it, you know, not just disparage it to the point where nobody wants to be involved. But I think at the end of the day, it really has to be about what are you there for? People ask you and possibly elected you to go represent their best interest. That has to be your first and foremost priority, is the people back in the district. Forget this ideology. And I think it boils down to political courage, leadership and political courage. And if an issue comes up, I don't know what it could be. But if it's not in the best, if it's in the best interest of a political party or an ideology or something I mean, listen, how does it affect the people back here? And that has to be your first and foremost consideration. And so for me, it's a simple matter of my run is really about out of frustration trying to go and make a difference. As I mentioned before, it's all about communicating, it's all about collaborating, it's all about compromise. And so you talk about political courage, if it's in the best interest to advance an issue and it's going to serve the people of our district, Michigan's 1st congressional district, then you got to have the courage to tell your caucus, my constituents are first and foremost, and I'm going to possibly cross party lines to make something happen to take care of our folks. People aren't willing to do that because people are very vulnerable. We got splinter groups within these two major parties, and it's one way or no way, you're out. Well, I think if you work hard in the best interest of people every single day, and when you look at an issue, every issue needs to be considered. Every issue you need to gather all the information. You need to listen to all points of view. You need to gather the facts. There's only one set of facts. And so you study the facts and you ponder the effect it's going to have on your district, and then you vote accordingly. I think if people know that you're not just into the ideological, you're into what is in the best interest of them, they'll stick with you, despite those splinter groups. If they know that your heart's in the right place and you're trying to do the right thing for the right reasons, they'll stick with you even if you make a vote that they disagree with, because they know that you're there for them. The moment that you go to Washington and start to think about ways of staying there, you've lost it. You've lost your direction. The focus has to always be the people of the district. And so in my case, I'm not going to stay. I'm going to work. I'm going to solve problems. I'm going to make things happen. My career has actually been about action, results, and accountability. And so when I do these things, if people like it, they'll keep me. If they don't like it, they won't keep me. I get it. I'm not going there to stay there. I'm going there to get things done. That's what I do. And so I think that's how you fix this. Be willing to communicate, be willing to collaborate, and by God, if it makes good sense for the people of the district, then you cross party lines and you compromise and you take care of the people back at home.
Final question, two-part question together. How do we deal with the deficit? And what about tax reform? What needs to be done, if anything?
The deficit, big issue. And so one of the ways you don't deal with the deficit is you do sequestration. You got to be smart about what you're doing. And so I can give you a couple of examples. I spent 40 years in the military. And so, in our military, we have, the branches of service. They're all under the Department of Defense, okay? But every branch has their own logistics system. Every branch has their own IT system. Everybody has their own maintenance system or human resources. Listen, we can't afford to do that anymore. The Chinese are going all over the world. The Chinese government is going all over the world trying to figure out ways to be smart about how you govern. I think it's time to reinvent government. We have a lot of things in place that, why do we do it this way? Well, we've always done it this way. It's time to take another look. And these aren't quick fixes by any means. This might be a 10 or 20 year undertaking. But we have to start doing that, and we have to be genuine about it. And yeah, there's some stakeholders that are going to be hurt. But just in my example of the Defense Department, there's a lot of waste and fraud and abuse in that whole process. And then we're inefficient in a lot of different ways. There's some efforts to move in that direction, but we need to do more, and we need to make it happen quicker. Everybody can't have their own special version of the helicopter or the armored vehicle. It's like, we got to get this right, and we could do it. We could save tremendous amounts of money. And there's been studies out there, $250 billion just in waste, fraud, and abuse. Well, we need to get after that too. And the way you do that is you got to make sure that you fund those agencies that are responsible to ferret out waste, fraud, and abuse, that they have the resources to go do what they're supposed to do. I think that's a great first step in how you get the deficit under control. The other question was tax reform. Absolutely. It's too complicated. We need to simplify it. Congressman Dave Camp spent several years working on some proposals. I don't just think a flat tax across the board is the best answer for everybody, but it certainly could be simplified. And so we got to make sure that we're not leaving anybody behind. The way that I was brought up, is everybody's got to, kind of do their share, okay? And nobody minds doing their share as long as everybody else is doing their fair share. And so, we're in this together. So the country needs to pull together. We need to make sure if we're going to have, we did 13 years of war in the Middle East. That's all put on the credit card. Well, that's not helpful. We should have went to the American people. Like we did in World War II, we need a war bond. We need to do something to kind of pay for this. Right now, it's all on the credit card. We're going to be paying this off for years. That's not the way to do business. And so, raising taxes is not a popular idea. If it makes sense, people are willing to pay as long as they don't think it's going to be wasted. If it makes sense. If it's for roads, that's a good local example. If the money, in Kalkaska, we just voted in a road millage, and I had a great conversation with our road commission manager, and I said, listen, and I know they're going to do the right thing. I said, but we need to make sure that all of this goes into roads, and it's got to be in every community so everybody sees the benefit of this. In some places, you pass a millage, and all of a sudden they're remodeling the office, and they're building up. That's not what people voted for. They want the potholes fixed. And I think the same thing applies to the state. I think it applies to the federal government. We get our ducks in a row, we get organized, and we make a case to the American people, they're more than willing to pay their fair share. But the tax code, yeah, absolutely needs to be reviewed. I think there's a couple of ideas out there with Dave Camp's legislation. Simpson Bowles had some great ideas. Now you could cut the deficit. Why aren't we doing this? No, we're going to do sequestration. Well, that's not the smart thing to do. That's too easy. There's too much room for people to hide behind. I say have the political courage to step up and take a stand and express your vote, and then let's see what happens. Don't hide behind all this confusion and dysfunction. Congress is broken. We need to fix it. We got a chance with this. We got great issues. We got great candidates. We got a great opportunity in this election. I just encourage everybody to get out and vote.